I was definitely curious about fuel range with the Rocket 3 just because the engine is so flippin' big. Fuel mileage I have calculated has been mid-30s. Nothing terribly exciting. I mean, that's pretty bad for a motorcycle, but it's not as bad as some bikes are, I suppose, that have a lot smaller engines. I think part of the reason is that the engine is just not very stressed, right? It doesn't have to do a whole lot of work to push this mass down the road, because at the end of the day, it's not that much mass considering how big the engine is. The mileage isn't surprising in any way, I don't think. It's not surprisingly good or surprisingly bad. And with a 5-gallon tank, you'd go 140, 150 miles, something like that, which, yeah, no, you're not going to want to ride this bike much longer than that anyway, to be honest. And now that we are on kind of a bumpy section of the road here, it's a good time to talk about the overall suspension compliance on the Rocket 3, which is good for what it is. Oh boy, it's just it's a low motorcycle, so it doesn't have a ton of suspension travel, and it's also a heavy motorcycle, which means the suspension has to be stiff to support that weight. And when you add those two things together, if you want a really plush ride, there's just not a lot you can do at that point, frankly. So I appreciate that the suspension offers a very kind of direct feeling, if you will, but it is not especially comfortable, certainly not plush. But I don't know, you know, in this category of bike, you're not going for plush. Like I said, you're going for a statement, you're going for something that's bold, and considering it's bold, I don't have a problem with the suspension tuning. Oh geez, someone spilled a bunch of sand or something on the road here. I wonder what happens if you have 160 foot-pounds of torque. Yikes. Okay, well, we answered that question. This, of course, is where we talk about general manners, ironically, around town. And the Rocket's pretty good at this kind of thing, I think. I think it handles quite well, but when you do come to a stop, couldn't do one of my footless stops. It's got quite a bit of rake in the front end, you know. I mean, it's sort of a cruiser thing to have the front wheel pushed out in front of the bike a pretty significant degree. And you know, while you're going a reasonable speed like this, it's pretty light and easy to use. But when you come down to really slow speeds like this, to try and come to a stop without putting your foot down, it's pretty difficult, in my opinion. And that's just a dynamic of a type of bike like this. Yes, the center of gravity is low, but the center of gravity is also massive. Hey, we got one. We got a footless stop in. That's pretty good. To be in part the wide tire. Nothing like basically a car tire on the back to help you stay balanced. In any case, one thing that is excellent on the Triumph, which is basically excellent on any Triumph, the fueling is just terrific. It's really, really, really nice. It's direct, it's easy to use, it's intuitive, it's smooth, it's not abrupt. It's really just a nicely designed system, and they all are. And I think it's a thing that Triumph really just kind of has figured out, whether it's a street twin or a Thruxton or a Scrambler or a Rocket or an adventure bike. They're all just really, they have nice fueling, which is kind of rare on modern bikes these days. Frankly, oftentimes they're just difficult. And I will say sport mode on this bike is a little tricky, but road mode's good. Woo! Spinning the tire. It's aggressive. It's really, really fun engine to use, as long as you do so responsibly, Zach. Riding this Rocket 3 got me thinking about the previous Rocket 3, which of course was also an enormous muscle cruiser that Triumph started building in the mid-2000s, maybe, something like that. But of course the Rocket 3 was also BSA. It was a BSA Rocket 3, wasn't it? And yeah, it was built in tandem with the Triumph Trident, I believe, in the late 60s, or it might have been early 70s. I'm not a Triumph historian, I apologize, but I did grow up around vintage bikes, and I remember the Rocket 3 moniker, and Triumph definitely did a pretty good job, I think, sort of taking what was old and reconditioning it, rebranding it, revitalizing it into something that is new, rather than just sort of glancing back into yesteryear. So I appreciate that, I suppose. Cruising along Lover's Lane here as we've come to know it. I can tell you that the passenger accommodations on the Rocket 3 are not great. Those passenger pegs folding out from the chassis like that are really cool, but the passenger seat itself is pretty thin, pretty narrow, and certainly without the little sissy bar attachment that comes on the GT model, your passenger's gonna want to hold on. The passenger accommodations I don't think necessarily match the ambition of the engine, if that makes sense. But it's there if you want to take someone on the back.